Hello, welcome to Lawrence County History Corner. And today I am doing a little bit more about the Scottown flood. Attorney Thomas D. Shirkey received a letter from his brother Edwin of Suter, of Lawrence County, telling about the Scottown flood. Mr. Suter had actually gone to Scottown to assist after the flood that hit in 1906. According to Suter, he had just returned from the flood from Scottown, where Willis Harper and he had been working all day with trying to remove the mud from John Dubb's house. The destructive wave, for such it was, struck Scottown around 3:30 a.m. Tuesday. It was a little Guyandotte, a river that came out, and all of its branches also caused the flooding. Dr. Thomas's house was turned around and lodged against a large group of locust trees on the outside of the sidewalk. By the water striking that house, the current turned, and then it struck Mrs. Sauer's home with full force. That caused, of course, Mrs. Sauer to lose her life and her daughter to barely survive. Both Sawyer and Mrs. Mannon got on a bed to keep themselves above water. But it didn't take long before the water reached their shoulders. Mrs. Sawyer ended up being tired from trying to stay above water. She fell from the bed and drowned. According to this account, Mrs. Mannon was stuck in water for 3 hours. The previous account said 2. The office building of the Thomas house is on the bottom side of the junction of the creek. The little millinery store next to John's Dobbs is farther down the creek, and all the houses were moved. Water and mud were 4 foot 8 inches deep in Rucker's and 5 foot 2 inches deep in Dobbs and John Rowe's home. Both stores are intact, but half of their goods were permanently damaged. According to the article, one horse was drowned in Rucker's stable, and Ed DeMint lost a horse in Dunphy's stable. Nat Burcham had 3 feet of water in his home. Jesse Burcham's store was broken up, and all his goods were carried away in the floodwaters. There are some people in Scottown who did not have a bite to eat all day Tuesday, of course, because of the storms and trying to survive. They estimated the damage to be in the thousands, which would have been a huge amount of money at the time. Jesse Rucker said it would take at least $1,000 for him to place him where he was before the storm. John Rowe, according to him, lost 180 young chickens. So it was just a devastating storm that struck. There are further accounts in the local newspapers. Again, this was in June of 1906. So if you're looking for more information, as you can see, it really gets really specific about how people were injured and what was lost. But that is the second part of the Scottown flood. I hope you enjoyed this little piece of Lawrence County history. Remember, you can check us out by going to our Ironton branch on the second floor. We have a variety of resources, and we're always willing to help. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time. The storm that spawned the flooding in Scottown also struck other areas. And in the semi-weekly Irontonian on the 8th of June, 1906, there is a description by the Wilgus according to the newspaper correspondent. He talks about 2 o'clock in the morning when the most severe storm hits the county. One of the most severe storms that ever hit Lawrence County, that section of Lawrence County, passed over Wilgus. But just after the storm passed over the Trace Creek Hill, Valley Hill, it met the one with the south. And of course, that was the one that they said caused the most damage. The damage done in Long Creek Valley was slight compared to what happened to Scottown. Long Creek was at the highest was at its highest as it has ever known, according to the oldest residents in the area. But aside from the damage to crops and some stock, people living on Long Creek was uninjured. At Scottown, however, that was not true. There was at least one fatality, and there were many others suspected. E. Schaefer's house near Trace Creek was moved off its foundation. Wall's store was washed away entirely, as was Jesse Burcham's store. And 1 mile above Scottown, the Jesse Burcham store was taken 1 mile above Scottown, down a creek. The post office in the village also was taken down the creek and ripped off its foundation. Water was up to the top of the counter in the platform store owned by and then John Dobbs, the veteran harness maker, and his wife had to be rescued. 2 feet of water was found in James Joseph's house, and the iron bridge over Trace Creek, just as the entrance to the village, remained anchored and intact. Mr. and Mrs. Perry Mannon, who was mentioned earlier, Mrs. Perry Mannon was actually the daughter of Mrs. Sayer, had gone to Scottown to visit her mother, and Mrs. Sayer's home was in the center of town, just west of the pike, and the water came rushing down the valley. They saw that the flood was imminent. Mr. Mannon went for a horse to rescue them, and while he was absent, the house itself was washed off its foundation and carried down to the bottom. Mrs. Mannon kept her mother's head above water as long as possible, but ended up to save herself, was compelled to let her mother loose, and Mrs. Sayer died. Mrs. Mannon stood in water up to her chin for 2 hours before she was rescued. She was either standing on a bed or on the windowsill with her head as far up as she could get towards the ceiling. It was reported later that Mrs. Mannon died 10 o'clock Wednesday morning, but the time that the article was written, no one knew if that was true. It was also purported that Dr. E. N. Miller lost all of his medication, or drugs, it says, and his library. But obviously the Mannon and Sayer family suffered one of the greatest loss. And that is just part 1, and there is more to come about the Scottown flood.